Thank you for handing over the presentation and good morning. I'm talking to you from Central Europe and dividing my time between Central Europe and the UK. So it's 2 a.m. In Europe. It's really nice to be here. And what I want to share with you today is a bit of an understanding how to actually prepare your manuscript in order to make it publication ready and to make it understood to the review panels that you are submitting your research to. So I would assume that you can see now my PowerPoint. I'm a medical doctor by trade, a medical researcher, and work with Editage as an academic trainer. So a big part of what I do actually during this session and also other sessions is to help other researchers through the knowledge that we have gained through our own scientific experiences on how to present your manuscript, present your research for it to be understood by a broad audience. And I work with Editage actually on making sure that the quality research that you do, regardless of where you do it in the world, regardless if it's your first language or second language, you are heard and that it is clear for everyone what you want to communicate to the scientific community. So there's more than 2,500 scientific collaborators worldwide with Editage, and we are there to help you also to accelerate the process of publishing high quality research. So in academia itself, at one point it was said that publishing is enough. If you published a manuscript, you were applauded. If you didn't publish it and still did research in a time very long ago, you were still regarded as someone who is highly qualified, who has been communicating with their students about the research, conducting the research, but might have not been actually known by the broader community. Through the time and through the development of journals itself, you came to the publish or perish. So you needed to publish in order to get recognition in the scientific community. The recognition was an important part of that journey in order for you to work as a scientist. We have gone through the point where it was very important also not only just to publish, but to publish in the high impact journals. So in the journals that there is actually a broad audience that will cite you also and will use your research in their further investigations. And currently, it seems sometimes that it really is published frequently in high impact journals, and maybe you won't perish. The competition within the scientific community to publish in high impact journals is very high. At the same time, it's very important to communicate your research and to gain establishment in the scientific community, not only by doing high quality research, but by communicating this high quality research also to the public that you want to impact with your research itself. Therefore, it's quite important that you make manuscripts that are clear, that have additional information that can give the public a better understanding of what impact you are willing to make. So, why do you actually publish? Sometimes it's to advance the frontiers of scholarly knowledge. So, the main goal is actually through the research projects that you do to advance our understanding of knowledge. But you also need to publish in a way that communicates effectively to your peers. So, not only that you do the research and that you understand that this is a puzzle piece that you have added to the topic that you are researching, but it also others understand what this puzzle piece means, and that you can understand, you can give them an understanding that as an expert in this area you have contributed knowledge, and that the knowledge that you have contributed um, will help us understand the scientific phenomena that you are researching better. When scientists talk, even within a certain discipline, it sometimes happens that we don't always talk the same language. So it's important to understand how to make it clear what language we are talking, so that not only a certain small, narrow group of people within your scientific discipline will understand it, but also the broader discipline that you belong to will have an understanding what this research means, what impact it has. And through this understanding and through finding a way to communicate your research effectively to the manuscript, you will also have a possibility to gain higher chances for acceptance of your research in different research journals. So, a traditional method of communicating your research results is through the IMRaD format. This is the most basic and mainstream structure of academic papers. It begins with the introduction, then gives a better understanding of the methods used in your research, so the reproducibility of the research, then communicates results of your research. So, what were your main findings? And it also communicates it in relation to other research, which is in the area of discussion and conclusions. Some other structures also talk about IMRaD not as results and discussion, but in some certain disciplines, it's results, analysis, discussion. So, another step in the area of the understanding of your research itself. So, you will start off with a basic understanding of what it is that you actually are investigating. So, what the topic of your investigation is. This is something that you will do in the introduction. So, during this topic investigation in the introduction, we will get more knowledge on the topic itself and on the gaps of knowledge that are present. In the next slides, we will go through more specific details of what exactly are some tips that you can use in order to structure your introduction effectively, and also show some examples of how to think about the introduction. Then we will proceed to the methods section. The methods section will be the second one in your manuscript. Some journals currently actually want you to represent methods at the very end, but the important part, even if it's in the very end or as it is in the traditional structure during the second part of your manuscript, is that the methods are very clear and enable other researchers to understand what approach you have used and how to reproduce this approach also in their own research. We will talk about more about what elements methods should have, and especially what elements they shouldn't have. Then the results part is important because it will communicate what the findings of your well designed research project are. So, if you have described the methods to a very good extent and have understood exactly and have given also the understanding for other researchers what exactly you have been performing, then the results will be the part where you will be communicating what the outcomes of your experiments were. In the discussion and conclusion part, you will compare it with other studies. Throughout this presentation, we will furthermore discuss on how you do this and what are the important parts of comparing it and what is there which you should not forget and are some common pitfalls also that reviewers are very careful about. If we look at it from a content perspective, you would imagine it that the manuscript will be quite broad in the topic in the beginning. So during the introduction, will become more specific towards your research project in the methods and results. And during the discussion and conclusion part, we'll again go into the broadness because you will not just talk about your specific research project, but you will place your specific research project within the broad area of the science that you are doing. So, how do you bring your research across the finish line? You have done the hard work of gathering your data and analyzing the data, but you need to build a story and communicate a story on what your outcomes are. It's very important to communicate your outcomes in terms of what their relevance is for the body of knowledge that is currently available on the research topic that you are discussing. Therefore, always when you start drafting a manuscript, an important part is to consider what the relevance of your research results is. And based on that relevance, also start to develop the introduction. Because through the relevance and the question, what is the relevance of my research, you will be able to develop the right introduction, which will be in some sort a state of the art of what is currently available on the research in the specific area that you're doing. And the first part that you will be communicating to the journal that you will be submitting your research to, as well as once your research is published to the reader that will be reading your research, is the title. So the title will be the first communication. The title is in some way a mini abstract of your study itself. Therefore, it needs to really reflect what exactly the relevance of your research is, what the main finding of your research is, and it is also an attempt of getting the reader's attention, of getting recognized for the research and asking the reader to read your research further on. While the title is an important part, it will be based on the content of your manuscript. So it can be written at the very end, but it's very good to think of it through the whole drafting process of the manuscript itself. The title, what you need to understand is that you need to keep it short and adhere to the guidance of a specific journal. So some journals will have shorter character limits or longer character limits, or even ask you to provide a full title and a shortened title. Within the title itself, you will need to use active verbs that the title sounds compelling. So let's say use words as determining, identifying, and also giving some of the information what the topic has found out. So what the main findings of that topic are. Include also the expected outcome of the study in your title. So, is it something that you have done in sort of in sort of diminishing metastasis if you're doing cancer research? Have you done something in prevention of health outcomes, so of bad health outcomes, and communicate that already in your title. And avoid general words, especially because you have a character limit usually, such as a study of, an exploration of. So get to the point and get to the point in a succinct manner. And an important part, and this is very important because you are communicating not only to a narrow area within your discipline itself, but to a broader audience within that specific topic area, is to avoid uncommon abbreviations and acronyms in the title. So while you are thinking about the title and thinking about drafting your manuscript, the next part you will importantly think about is the abstract. Some researchers do decide to write up the abstract at the end, once you have prepared all of the other parts of your manuscript. But at the same time, if you decide to do it in the beginning, the abstract can be a well designed guidance to draft your paper in a whole. So, abstracts are standalone summaries that communicate the essence of your manuscript. They will be from ranging from 100 words to 250 to 300 words usually. They can be technical abstracts with an emphasis on the aims, methods, and the data that is available. But some journals currently also are focusing a lot more on providing also lay abstracts. And these lay abstracts are meant for the lay public also to understand in a non-technical language what you did. This is very important if we think about the idea that research is not only for the scientific community, but needs to impact the broader community in which we live in. And that's why even the lay abstracts are gaining so much more recognition, especially in the areas of medicine. So the abstract decides whether readers will read ahead the full text and their attitude. So it's important that you make a good first impression in the abstract and provide an effective overview of your manuscript. So they should address key elements which talk about the research rationale, about the aims and hypotheses of your research, the methods that you have used, the outcomes, so the results, and the implications. Not always will they be structured abstracts. Sometimes the abstracts are unstructured, and if they are unstructured, then you will still use the same content, but you will put it together in a short paragraph. And the abstract usually ends with keywords that can help determine the content of the study and that help you be findable in databases itself. So, in the introduction itself, you will introduce then a research area and explain the research gap or problem. As we have said, the introduction itself is broad, but it will still have a structure that will go from a very broad content, so a broad background. I do a lot of research in endometrial cancer, so I would maybe talk about endometrial cancer, but then address the specific problem within the area of endometrial cancer. So, what is the problem? And what exactly were the aims of our research? So, how did we address the problem? What question did we ask in order to address that problem? So, the problem is in some way the highlight motivation that we have about our research. So, why did we actually want to do the research? And why is it significant? What will it contribute to others? Then we will have a detailed literature review showing that this problem hasn't been solved yet in our area of research. And then we will explain exactly what the proposed research will address within that problem. And in the end, include in our aims the hypothesis and implications of our research. So begin firstly in the background with general information. Then narrow the focus to a specific problem you have studied. and then state your rationale and aims. And these aims need to be followed through your manuscript as a whole, and you will always have to return back to these aims and ask yourself, does my methodology really answer these aims? Does my discussion really talk about how we addressed these aims itself? So we can look at the introduction in 3 steps. Firstly, we present the research area, so the perspective, the broader area that we are talking about. Then we present the problem, so raise the question, what exactly is the gap in knowledge that we still need to fill with our research? And then guide the reader through this analysis of the problem and state of the art to the purpose of research. So, to present the solution and to present the significance of the study. When you are designing your introduction, it is important to understand what is the problem you have researched so that the reader understands in what area you are working and what the problem was and how you addressed the problem until now and what has been done through your research project that adds to this analysis. So, what don't we know yet, and how can we address this what we don't know yet through the research that you are doing? If we look at a specific example, let's say a researcher is evaluating the usefulness of a gene called TP53 for prognosis in gastric cancer. So the paper in the introduction would present data on somatic mutations in TP53 in gastric cancer and their relation to the known oncological outcomes, so to overall survival and disease-free survival or recurrence-free survival, depending on the setting. So, in the possible outline of such an introduction, you will start firstly, let's say, with gastric cancer epidemiology and factors that influence disease free survival and overall survival. Then you would further follow up with the currently available evidence on TP53 mutations in gastric cancer. So, what did other researchers already do, especially in that specific area that you are addressing? And what did you think you add to that research? And end it with the aims of your research. Are you looking at the same data? Are you connecting it with something else? So, what exactly is the aim of your research itself? Then you move in drafting your manuscript to the second area. So, that is the area of research design and methods. In this section, this is probably carefully reviewed by most of the reviewers that you will encounter during your journey. And it is meant to make sure that the scientific method that you have used in your research is sound. So, scientific experts will assess if the methods are adequate to deliver the reliable results. If you have used a method that isn't very well understood within the manuscript, so you maybe have underdescribed it, it can take into question the reliability of your results. So it's very important to provide specific information on the research design, the sampling criteria, and selection of, let's say, patients if you do research in medicine, if you do research, let's say, in basic sciences, very much important on what specific model, let's say, in vitro you are doing research. Then, if you are doing research with human participants, especially important what the recruitment plan was, so the sites involved, the manner of recruitment, the procedures that have been used, the measures tested. So, did you use questionnaires? Were they validated? Have you gained any sort of approval for this specific use of methods. Also, the imaging parameters or technical equipment that you have used. What have you done in terms of data management or maintaining confidentiality? If this is a specific issue in some certain research designs, this is very important. And also, what statistical analysis have you done? So, what is the size sample calculation for your research? Is it underpowered? What the variables have you used? And the software for analysis. You can also use figures to depict the methods, especially if it's a very complex study, using more than just one method, or maybe using a broad range of methods that have a succinct way of going from one step to the other. You can also depict it in figures, and I personally, as a reviewer, I'm very happy if we can depict it, if I can review a paper that is with figures within the methods section in order to understand the research even more clearly. So, methods should make your research reproducible. You should be sure that other researchers, when they are reading up your methods, are able to understand what you actually wanted to tell them, what you did, and therefore could again try to do it at their group. So describe details to understand what the groups were. And if you are using any sort of methodology that has been previously validated, add references to that methodology. May it be questionnaires, may it be previously described more in detail research or instruments used. Describe not only how you have performed your research, but how you did the analysis. So, what the statistic analysis was, and name how data of different types were analyzed. An important part as a reviewer, which I see quite often, is that sometimes you have researchers already reporting some of the results in the methods area. Let's say number of participants in that specific study, or discussing the methods already in the methods part of the manuscript. I would advise against it, as this is probably something that you would have to expand on and do it in the results and in the discussion area. So, if we look at an example of a group that has performed analysis on calcium levels in pregnant women to predict impact on newborn development. So, possible outlines of the methods section would be to describe the time frame the research was conducted in, how patients were recruited, the inclusion and exclusion criteria. Then we would move further on to what tests were used to assess the newborn development. So, reference also the methods, reference also what instruments were used to measure the calcium levels, and then move to the third point on how the data was analyzed. So, which statistics were used. From describing very reproducibly the methods, we would go to the area of results. In results, we would present the data in a structured way. So, present your data in a way that is relevant to the research question that you posed at the end of the introduction. Usually, you would start with characteristics of the group that you have researched. So, as said before, in the methods area, you would tell us how you recruited your participants, how you have decided on the group that you wanted to study, and here you would describe the characteristics of the group itself. Results are written usually in past tense, and they use different modes of data depiction, meaning don't just use text, but also don't just use figures and tables. Try to use a diverse set of the different data depiction methods, and and also integrate these different data depiction methods within each other, meaning if you are introducing a figure, presenting your research, also talk about it within the results area. So mention it and tell what exactly the figure, the table is communicating and how this relates to all the other results within your research. And in this area, so the results area, do not comment on the data in this section. Present the data, and you will have enough space to discuss on it in the discussion and conclusions part. Common mistakes in the results area are usually to not label the tables and figures. So to maybe just present a figure and hope that it is self-explanatory. Always give a description of the figure that you are presenting and how this is relating to the research. Then a second common mistake is to not refer to tables and figures in the text. So if you introduce it, connect it with the text. And also to rely too much on tables and figures. So you need to explain your results also in the text. It's quite important in order to make the communication, as we have talked in the beginning, more relatable to other scientists, to use images, artwork, and presentations in order to better give an understanding of your research. So try to use illustration and schematics, so researchers' arts, or image rendering and editing software in order to represent the research that you have done appropriately. Try to do the data visualization so it becomes more self-evident what your data is about. Different multimedia formats that you can use within a manuscript can be used either for graphical abstracts, so adding additional layers of communication of your research, such as a drawing that explains your research very briefly, or infographics, which will be used more as part of communicating the research further on, and also video summaries, which points also to the lay summaries and to the graphical abstract, so a different way of visualization. So the results section will enable you with the use of the appropriate figures, appropriate tables, and text to communicate what your findings are. But now you need to put your findings within the context of other research. So in most current biomedical formats, this will be just the discussion part of the manuscript. The discussion will talk about what the results you produced are in the meaning towards the body of knowledge that has been known from previously. So start strong, start with your main findings. So what is the main finding from your results? What is the main data? And what does this data mean for the body of knowledge? Then consider if your results are in concordance to previous data. Are they in some way contradictory? And why is it that they are contradictory? And here you can discuss either if it's a methodological difference, if it's a difference in a population, or what exactly has happened in order to be from your data to be a bit different from the data that was previously published. An important part of your research project will be to advance science. So recommend what further exploration is also needed once you have put in this gap of knowledge. So once you have given more information on the specific gap of knowledge, what is still missing? What are the next steps in research? So recommendations for further exploration. And a part that is very important, and I find that sometimes is lacking in manuscripts when I review them, is also what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses of your research project. So consider what your study limitations are and be frank about them. Consider how your research has been impacted by the methodology, by the sample size, and especially in biomedical manuscripts, can you translate the data to humans? So, if doing in vitro studies or xenografts. And this is all very important to consider and also to communicate, as it will enable the broader community to get a better understanding of where to place your research within the understanding of the knowledge that has been given. So don't forget about the study limitations. Think about how your data will remain valid even though you have some limitations. And if these limitations are unavoidable, the transparency in the manuscript by discussing the potential limitations is very appreciated. So, describe the limitations in a way that we will understand how this was dealt with through the study execution and the results. Have you adjusted your statistical analysis for the confounding factors? Along with potential limitations where possible, also offer alternative solutions about how you could approach this problem in the future. And if alternative solutions cannot be proposed, explain how you minimize the challenges for future studies. And in the conclusions part, state what the importance of your research for the field is. Usually, you don't introduce new evidence in that part. It's just a part to summarize what the findings of your paper in relation to the body of knowledge are, and don't overstate the importance of your research. You won't save the world with your research project, but you will put good puzzle piece towards your body of knowledge. So conclude with a realistic view what the addition to the current body of knowledge is and how you have addressed this through your manuscript. An important part of preparing your manuscript are also citations and references. Usually, at the end of the manuscript, you need to ensure that all references cited have been included in the reference list. You will see that different journals have different guidelines for formatting of citations and references. Some are more strict than others. Some of journals will even offer you submit it in any citation manner that you want to, just as long as it is coherent. And then they will do the citation formatting for you. But this is not the case for all the journals. Also ensure that references have not been cited twice in the list. So that is very important because you will hyperinflate your reference list and also leave the reader doubting about if all references are correct. So an important part is that you try to use a reference manager, which will do the thinking about not citing research twice for you, such as Mendeley or EndNote. And also, at the end, proofread that references have been entered correctly, even if you are using the reference manager. As a general thought, use recent references for your manuscript. So, let's say from the previous 5 years, and use relevant references. Why should you use references from the previous 5 years? It usually shows that you have a good grasp on what the current body of knowledge is, that you understand that some developments have come through in the recent years, and that you understand and are in your state of the art. Poor citations and references may be indicative of poor review of literature, so poor attention to detail. So take your time and take the time to do the references correctly. You can use a reference manager system, especially if you have a high volume of PDFs, so high volume of manuscripts that you need to refer to. And you have different formats and different styles that you use for referencing. So there is probably a very big variation within styles for different journals. So this means that if you use reference managers, you try to minimize errors within referencing that are happening. So here you have an overview of different reference management tools that you can use in order to enhance your manuscript itself. So RefWorks, Mendeley, Zotero, EndNote. This is partially depending on your institutional policy and the access that you have to different licenses, such as the EndNote license. I am a very big proponent of Mendeley, so this is an example of a reference management app. It's free and it automatically generates bibliographies as you write and imports and organizes them systematically. It's available also in a mobile and desktop format. Why is this so important? So I not only use Mendeley as a reference management app, but sometimes also can conveniently read on my commute the research that I'm currently doing, so other authors, and even highlight text that I might want to return to. So it helps you to annotate and organize documents and can be used across different platforms seamlessly. After you have done all the preparation of your manuscript, you will still need to proofread and format your manuscript. And a writer's style should not place obstacles between his ideas and the minds of his readers. Meaning, it's very important to try to be clear in your manuscript, even if English is not your first language, and to try to get your idea across in the best way possible. And the format of a manuscript may vary across different journals, and authors should not only format their manuscript based on style, based on spelling, but also based on the guidelines of the specific journal. So some journals will often have very strict conformance rules, and any deviation from those rules can lead to rejection. So once you are doing the final typos and final checks of your manuscript, try to think about the language that you use and improve the language that you use. So be specific in your writing. Avoid unspecific terms such as we attempted to explore if there is a relationship, and instead use more specific writing such as the objective was to investigate the relationship between and. So when in doubt, you should be, for clarity reasons, able to break a long sentence in two sentences to improve readability, and use words that will make it easy to follow the content. So try to avoid jargon. I know it's very difficult because a researcher has always in mind that you are communicating to other researchers. But have in mind that there is a lot more tendency to understand cross-disciplinary research and try to avoid specific jargon in order to be more clear also to the broader discipline that you belong to. And in order to be clear and also to be cited by others, you will need to be understood by others. Avoid too many acronyms. So try to use acronyms minimally and use acronyms that are well known. Once you start using an acronym, firstly spell it out and then use it consistently within the whole text. And clear writing starts with clear thinking. So revise sentences and paragraph sequencing to ensure clear flow of your ideas. While the first draft of your manuscript might not have so much focus on the clear writing, so the sentences might be long, a second, third, and fourth revision should help you get the effective language across. So, some last tips for formatting are to ensure that all specifications are met. Proofread all the documents that you are submitting to ensure correct language use and readability. So ensure that you adhere to specifications if there are page limits or formatting or document types. And bear in mind that poor English use might affect readability and understanding of the content. So find someone who will maybe give you feedback on what they think your manuscript is about. And if they don't have the same idea of what you wanted to communicate, then try to make it clearer and ask them maybe to read it again, to tell you then again if the message that you are sending with your manuscript has changed. So try also maybe to seek help from native English speakers or specialist editing services to improve the application of language and impact. As said before, ask a friend to read it through and don't be discouraged if actually what they tell you your manuscript is about is something different than you thought it was about. It's a very good point to start and to improve your manuscript writing even further to communicate your idea clearly. And once you have done all these steps, submit the manuscript and fingers crossed, we will read your research soon. Thank you.
Great. And Monika, it looks like we actually have a question in the Q&A section. Do you have access to that, or would you like me to just read that to you?
Yes, I have access, but let me just open it. Sometimes I see more papers that mention a brief summary of the methods or strategy at the end of the introduction. I think this is good for understanding the rational flow of the paper, but is this common? What do you think of this? Is the question. So, especially if we look about the gap of knowledge, and if we talk about the gap of knowledge in the introduction, and we want to point out a certain rationale that we are following through, it seems like a good idea in some cases to also just give a brief introduction of what the method that you will be using to follow that aim is. So, in that point of view, I think it's a good idea to maybe just mention a bit the method, but usually you would not spend a lot of time in the introduction itself and also not a lot of words on the methodology itself. So maybe a sentence or two are wise to do, but I wouldn't spend a lot more time on that. Are there maybe any other questions?
I believe that was the only one so far. Um, oh, it's the same one. Okay. All right. Any new questions?
Sometimes, maybe as a general tip, sometimes it's quite difficult to start with writing up your research, but a first draft is especially that, a first draft. So you will be revising that first draft and maybe just taking a day or two off away from the manuscript and looking towards the manuscript with new eyes, then again will help you even to get your ideas clearer and to communicate more succinctly your research. So maybe try to use that method, and also sometimes just really ask a colleague to read it through before submitting to get a clear idea if you have communicated what you want to communicate.
Great. And it looks like there's another. So also from Godot, if it takes more than 1 to 2 months for receiving the first decision from the journal, can I ask about the status of our paper to the journal? What is the cutoff timing of asking these inquiries? It's a good question.
So, this is a good question. I mean, I'm a surgeon by trade, so I'm impatient in general. But it happens that most of the journals currently will have a certain average review time or average time to the first decision. So that can be some orientation when you could expect a decision. I personally would ask the editor or the handling editor after, let's say, 2 months, what is happening with the manuscript. With the development of different submission systems, you can see very well if it's still under review or if all the reviews are already in. So that helps a lot, actually, with the understanding where your manuscript is about. So, considering the average review time and also looking at the manuscript submission system, if you still feel that it takes a bit longer than it was intentionally meant, it might be a good way to just ask a polite question if there is any movement on the manuscript itself. But as publishers, maybe you can also just add some additional knowledge from your side on this topic.
Yes, so I second Monica on this. So with the online submission system, most of the time you will be able to follow your manuscript and see which stage it is at. And for our journals, so basically once we decide to send it out for peer review, you will receive an email saying now we are contacting potential reviewers. So basically, I would say expect some time there, because not all the reviewers are available, so that will take some time. So for us, our general practice is once the manuscript has been with us for over 30 days, without the author asking, we normally send an email to the corresponding author, letting the author know there is a potential delay due to maybe a late reviewer, and we are chasing the reviewer and hoping to make a decision as soon as possible. So that's how we have been doing it. But even before that, if you sometimes, especially when there's competing manuscript, or if you are in a very tight deadline for a grant renew or some award application, feel free to reach out to the handling editor. For us, it's like one sentence. We will write back telling you, where the manuscript is at, so you can, I guess, have the peace of mind that someone is working on the manuscript. It's not just, sitting on someone's desk.
So we have a few more questions. One is, can a conference paper be submitted to a journal? This is a good question because you have restrictions in different journals. Some would say maybe you can submit research that has previously been presented at a conference, but only as a short abstract. Sometimes you will have conference papers that are quite extensive at the conference itself. So avoid resubmitting something that you have already published as a conference proceeding. But this depends on how much you have published. Have you gathered additional data, and never ever just copy the data to a manuscript. And so this is just a short answer on that topic. The next question is how to write the expected results and discussion in a research proposal. So a research proposal is a bit different from a manuscript. You would use some of the elements that you use in a manuscript itself. You would use also a lot of power analysis and all the other parts, but I think it's a bit out of the scope of today's webinar to discuss also that part. And the next question is then for Rory and Cindy. So are preprints accepted at your journals?
Yep, and we actually did cover that a little bit earlier with bioRxiv and some of the other tools that we discussed. And yeah, there's also a question here about license type. So actually, one of the points that I wanted to emphasize is that the copyright of the published paper, it remains with the authors. So the author can publish that to their institution's website as well as their own repository. So that's important. And those different license types, those primarily refer to the immediate open access. So it carries the CC BY, and that's just Creative Commons, and BY is the byline. So just remember to credit the authors. And that is the sort of less restrictive license for the use. And then the other license is actually, what is it? Let me see here. I actually have to pull it up myself because it is a long string of acronyms. It is, yes, CCBY NCSA. So CCBY, we covered that. NC is non-commercial, so it just shouldn't be used for commercial use. And the SA is share alike, and that just means that any derivative from it should carry the same license. And so that's it. I actually have better resources that can explain it way better than I can. So I'll go ahead and share that actually after the webinar. So yeah, and then who can I contact about my research? We'll also be including some contact information as well in a follow-up to webinar attendees. So yeah, I think that's about it. Unless there are any other questions. Nope. Well, Monika, thank you so much for that presentation. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us and answering questions on behalf of JEM. And thank you all as well, all you attendees who tuned in tonight. This has been great. It's been a very enlightening webinar. So thank you again, and yeah, stay tuned for more information to come to your inboxes. And I guess that's about it. So thanks.